Hello, another day of quality quarantine, and we are on Theology Thursday, and we're going to be talking about sanctification today. So my name is Hillary Ferrer. I'm with Mama Bear Apologetics, and with me is
Amy Davison, also from Mama Bear Apologetics.
Elizabeth Urbanowitz from Foundation Worldview.
And I'm Lindsay Medenwalt from Mama Bear Apologetics.
So today we're kind of taking our theme from, talking about what was going on with Moses and with the people, and we're going to talk about sanctification today. So sanctification is just kind of a big word that means this is the process that God takes us through so that we're becoming more like him. So it's like, you have that moment of salvation where you're absolutely justified before the Lord, and he says, you are my child, come live with me forever. But before you do, a lot of times there's a long process of sanctification where we actually learn to be more like Christ. And it's kind of learning to be the kind of people who would want to be in heaven. Because honestly, I think being in heaven, there's some people who I've actually heard someone, when John debated this guy, say that if heaven meant he had to go with the God of the Bible, that he would actually choose to be in hell. So this idea that everybody would choose to be in heaven is not the case. And so we are becoming the kind of people who would actually want to be in heaven, because our hearts, our affections, all of that have been trained to seek that which the Lord seeks. So we're going to talk about the passages from Hebrews 12, and let's see, I've got a screen up above my screen, so if it looks like I'm looking off in the distance, it's Hebrews 12. We're going to read 7 through 15, where it says, endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you're not disciplined and everyone undergoes discipline, then you're not legitimate, not true sons and daughters of all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. But how much more should we submit to God, the Father of spirits, and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. That's one of the big points we're going to make today. No discipline seems pleasant. It's painful. Later, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. And this is where it's kind of funny when it's talking about sanctification that Lindsay originally pointed out this one verse. I'm like, oh, what's that other verse? And then we discovered they were right next to each other. Is the kind of lesson that she feels that we're all sort of learning in quarantine right now. Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. So what are your thoughts on this, Lindsay, on this that's a lot there.
Yeah, so you might hear a dog in the background, #real life. Something is bothering the dog, and I don't know what it is, but not our dog, our neighbor's dog. So originally we talked about this, and maybe 12 wasn't super relevant, but when we're thinking about first holiness, this was something that God right off the bat emphasized to Moses. If we're going to talk about what we've been talking about in previous episodes, do we call these episodes in previous
episodes?
He had Moses remove his sandals and said, you're standing on holy ground. And what does holiness mean? And what is sanctification? And how do we get there? And as parents, as people who are maybe teaching children and over children and mentoring children, how do we teach them to be sanctified in Christ? How do we show this to them? And that's where verse 12 really becomes important. It says, therefore. So this is the reason when there's a therefore, I've learned that you should probably go back and read what you just read, because what comes next isn't going to make sense if you haven't read the context clearly. So therefore, strengthen the hands that are weak and the knees that are feeble. We're not necessarily trying to do all of this for our own sanctification. We're raising up children who also need to know the truth of Christ and why God has done the things that he's done and why he sent Christ to begin with, right? So maybe we can handle that as adults, but our job is to help those who are weaker than us. And in this instance, that would be our kids, right? They're probably weaker spiritually than we are, although, some children have amazing faith. You can name one. My 6-year-old is one example of that. God lives in her pocket, which is not theologically sound, but that's how it makes sense to her.
That's cute. I didn't know she said that.
That is cute.
She originally asked, how does God fit in my heart? It's only so big. I'm like, you're right. But faith like a child, but sometimes they don't have that faith. And how can we grow that in them? And really, that's part of what this is teaching them how to be sanctified and showing them through our actions. Like, this is what a Christ follower does. These are the behaviors that we illustrate. These are the attributes that we exhibit. If we're going back to several weeks right now, the attributes of God within us, and how can we show those to our kids? And that's really what this verse is talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As I think about sanctification, sometimes, when we were talking beforehand and we were talking about sanctification as a lifelong process, and I was just like, I hate that. Like, it just kind of like drives me nuts, probably your little girl, Lindsay, might have a really cheerful attitude about that. And me, I'm just like, oh.
You can't check it off your to-do list.
Yes, it bothers me. They can't do that. But just thinking about how patient God is with us, and how faithful he is at, sanctifying us one step at a time. I'm so thankful that God has not revealed all of my faults to me, at one time that need to be worked on. And I think when we're working with our kids, and especially like in this quarantine season where things are just like more stressful because like we're like in the house together all the time, there isn't that time of separation, and there's just like higher emotions because like there's so many things that are different and are uncertain, just to have like real grace and encouragement with our kids to actually be intentional about pointing out things that we can see God doing in our kids' lives, like whether it's like normally one of them will blow up at the other one when, somebody pushes them or takes their toy or something, and they don't blow up, just to like praise them and be like, wow, like, normally your response is this, but this time you did that. That's so incredible. Like I can see God at work in you, and to encourage that. And, even we talked about having a praise board a few weeks ago, or you can do an encouragement one, writing on little sticky notes, things that you're seeing your kids do well, you're seeing God sanctify them, but also to realize that it's like different levels. Because like our kids are all different and they're all going to struggle with different things. And like where we might, praise one for getting out of bed in the morning without us having to tell them 5 times. We only had to tell them 4 times this morning, like that might be something that we praise one kid for, where another one, might be at a completely different place. And like, we're praising them for, actually taking the initiative and like mowing the lawn, on their own. So just to have grace with our kids and be intentional about pointing out like, wow, I can see God at work in you here. So that because like me, who feels really discouraged about sanctification, like if we could just encourage our kids, that would make a huge difference.
And not comparing them to each other, because like I'll just tell you my experience with that. My sister's nickname from childhood up by my cousins was Saint Leslie, and so it's like anyone who ever met me thought I was a goody-goody. I'm like, I'm the rebel of the family. And so it's like the things that maybe she was good at that just came naturally to her, just always being quiet, always being, what? I'm not quiet. I know it's hard to imagine, but, she was always good at being quiet, really obedient, and she wouldn't forget stuff. I forget stuff all the time. And so, but the things that they needed to praise me for would be different than the things that they praised. And I needed to know that we weren't being compared. And so I think you've had this with some of your elementary school kids, is finding where they have progressed as opposed to where someone else has progressed, and recognize all progress, really is kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I think what also helps too is to also show the purpose within the struggle. Like I've got my youngest, he's my dramatic one, to where like if something doesn't go right the first time, it's like he flops over and it's just this is the end of the world. He's so over the top. But in those moments, sometimes it's easy, especially for little ones, to get overwhelmed, especially when this struggle is longer than anticipated, that it's longer than a few minutes or days or whatever, is helping them understand that, this struggle can actually be a good thing, because it keeps us right at the forefront of what we need to fix and work on and what we're seeking after. That's one thing that struck me as I was reading through the story of Moses and interaction with Pharaoh. He actually asked for repentance a couple times, and he said, when he was in the midst of, the gnats and the boils and the locusts and the darkness, he was actually repentant. But then the second that those struggles were lifted, all of a sudden he just shifted right back into his poor mindset. And sometimes that's so easy to happen, is once we get out of those struggles and we go into comfort, so often comfort slides us into complacency. So I think it's helpful for kiddos to affirm the struggle and say, yes, I've been there, share times where you're struggling or places where you've struggled with sanctification. Usually it's a funny story and kids really appreciate that, you look a little more human to them.
They love hearing how you've messed up.
They love it. It's great. And so to encourage them in that, but also to show them that, there is purpose for this, and the process of sanctification, that refinement, sometimes that requires us to go through the fire a little bit.
Yeah, it does. So that's kind of like our little quick discussion on sanctification today. I'm sure you can think of a lot of ways that the things that the Lord has brought you through, and you can really see how the way that you react to the world now is different from before then, that you had to learn that patience. You had to learn just to endure things that you never thought you'd have to endure. And at the end of this quarantine, we're going to discover that maybe we are a lot more patient with the people around us, because we've kind of been forced into that, and that's a good thing. And that is something that we should be praising God for. So that's Theology Thursday. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow on Fun and Fellowship Friday, where we're going to talk about the fun way to look at perseverance, and something fun we can do that shows that it takes time, but the end results are worth it. So we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.